Poland may have just said the quiet part out loud. Is NATO in a state of cyber war with Russia? Just what's the evidence? Is this exaggeration or is this just catching up to reality? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. Okay, so this is actually a pretty crazy story to have Poland come out and say. This is actually Polish Minister of Digital Affairs at a press conference saying, we are in a de facto cyber war. Poland saying it's uncovered cyber saboteurs working for Russia and Belarus that were targeting, of course, a wide variety of things, right? It says, in recent days, thanks to cooperation with security services, it was possible to break up a group of saboteurs who had specific goals in Poland and were addressed from a specific location. This is actually him being cagey intentionally, right? Because, again, they don't want to reveal sources and methods. Because if they say, hey, we detected them doing X, Y, and Z, it could possibly alert the Kremlin to how, right? They said, oh, they didn't detect us until we started doing X, Y, and Z. And Kremlin will say, oh, that tells us that when we were doing ABC, the Poles didn't detect it. So it tells them what they have and haven't found. So they're trying to keep things a little cagey. But what we do know is that one example Grakowski highlighted, this is the Polish Minister of Digital Affairs, said there was a recent cyber attack on the Polish anti-doping agency, which is interesting, right? We know that the Summer Olympics just took place and that a major Russian talking point was actually that the Summer Olympics are illegitimate, right? And this is, of course, a function of the fact that Putin's personally offended that Russian athletes were banned, the Russian nation was banned from representation, but Russian athletes were allowed to compete as neutral athletes, something like Neutral Olympic Committee or something, or non-aligned athlete or something like that. But this was seen as something that offended Putin personally, even if it didn't really impact the war. Again, the Olympics are sports; they're playing games with each other. So it's not exactly the life or death struggle that's going on in eastern Ukraine, but for Putin, it was still a blow to his prestige, and he wanted to delegitimize it. So we know that one route that they took was actually the transgender boxer thing, right? A lot of the media sources about the alleged transgender boxer, right? But obviously, there's no evidence that any boxer was trans. None. In fact, many of the boxers that the Russians claimed were trans literally shared pictures of them like, hey, here's me as a 9-year-old girl, and now I'm competing as a woman. So seems consistent. I don't know what to tell you. This kind of, but this is classic Russian behavior. There was also, of course, the Russians really loved that weird parade where they were like, oh, it's the Last Supper in drag. Again, something that we traced back to Russian sources. Don't get me wrong, art is weird, and there's no law that says you have to like all of it. But again, the fact that it got amplified into a huge thing instead of just what it was, which is, hey, the French are kind of weird. Guilty as charged. Is a classic Russian disinformation maneuver. So it makes sense then that they would go after the Polish anti-doping agency, possibly trying to either fabricate results to make it look like Polish athletes who had not doped had doped, or the opposite, to try to uncover data that Polish athletes might have tested positive for something, leaking that data and saying, look, Polish athletes cheat too. Again, we know this is something that Russia is willing to do, right? They famously profiled in the documentary Icarus. Russian athletes routinely were busted with under engaging in large-scale doping operations. But this is just a part of it. And even the Russians acknowledge that in addition to these cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, hack and leak, there's also intelligence gathering that takes place, right? Hacking efforts or phishing schemes that simply try to get information and don't necessarily go on the offense, so to speak. Poland, by all accounts, has been on ground zero of this. Accordingly, they've reported 400,000 cyber attacks just in the first half of 2024 alone, which is crazy because the same system reported 370,000 cases in the entirety of 2023. So literally, Poland exceeding twice its previous total of cyber attacks detected in their country. Absolutely crazy stuff, guys. And I think this is really significant because it's not just targeting Poland. It does seem like the closer to the Kremlin you are, the more likely you are to be targeted. But we are all potentially caught in the Kremlin's net. Now, one of the things that we have seen is the Kremlin's efforts to buy influencers. But I am not for sale. I worked for the U.S. government for 7 years. I was unable to say a lot of the things that I saw when I was a part of it. And that's okay. I understand why, as a government employee, you have to choose your words carefully. But I swore I would never work and have my ability to give my opinions curtailed by any government ever again. But the only reason I can do that, the reason I can curve all of these people and even sponsors, corporations that want me that have, they want to make sure my videos are sponsor friendly, but I don't care. And the reason is because I have you guys. You guys have my back. CombatVetNews.com. That's the best place to support me. If you want those twice a week uncensored combat videos, the GoPro footage that I can't show on YouTube, that is available to anyone, any one of these tiers, specialist, lieutenant, and colonel. If you want the exclusive Q&A to ask questions, get responses about anything, that's for lieutenant tier, and colonel tier for the true blue, dyed-in-the-wool, awesome supporters. Those guys get the shout-outs by name at the end of every video and the golden recognition. So check it out, combatvetnews.com, or the link is in the description. Sign up, get those videos, and keep me independent. Again, not that the Kremlin's like clamoring to pay me. Again, they seem to target people who are already sort of adjacent to Kremlin narratives. And boy, we've raised a lot of money to buy Ukrainians FPV drones, but I've had the Ukrainian government try to get me on message, and I've told them to go pound sand, right? I'm not for sale. So anyway, let's talk about the scale of Russian cyber attacks. And that's something that's really hard for us to appreciate sometimes. But when you look it up, Russian hackers are just here to sow chaos. Yeah, they are here to hack into U.S. healthcare systems, right? Which are notoriously vulnerable because they're private entities and they can save a couple of bucks by skimping on cybersecurity. So they do. Again, in the last 4 years, my wife has been worked at institutions that have been completely bricked by Russian cyber criminals twice, right? In 2 different states. And this is not an accident. The Russians want to do this both to raise funds, some of which go to funding the war in Ukraine, but most of it just goes to funding more cyber attacks. But also, this is just meant to degrade U.S. infrastructure, right? Again, if Russia were to bomb a U.S. hospital, we would identify it as an act of war. But somehow, when they brick the computers of large U.S. healthcare systems, they're somehow seen as just an accident, just a little whoopsie-daisy. This sort of willingness to let Russia do whatever they want and face nothing is absolutely criminal, and I think a real weakness of the U.S. government. They claim they respond, but oftentimes we don't even see how it happens. But you could see just the scale of these attacks, and this is just hospital systems, not to say anything about other infrastructure, power, local governments, state governments. For example, just a few days ago, right? Just here we go, September 4th. So just 6 days ago, we had the Treasury Department and DOJ say, listen, we busted the Russians with 32 internet domains that they had purchased to masquerade as real news websites, presumably. And then, at Putin's direction, these Russian companies bought the domains, created fake influencers out of nothing, and fake profiles, and then used AI-generated narratives on social media, right? So not only are they buying and selling existing influencers to parrot Kremlin narratives, they're building their own from the ground up using AI to create these fake influencers. So again, if you've got somebody who's, not like me, right? You know that I'm not AI-generated, but that Twitter profile that says like hashtag, maybe they say they're a doctor, but they say, things that the vaccines are poison. Maybe they claim that they are an attorney that gives takes about that. Oh, what your your favorite candidate's doing is actually illegal. There's so many different ways they can use AI and social media to spin it. And remember, Russia is great at not just organically growing these fake profiles, but they can also use their botnets, right? The same cyber attacks that can take down a hospital can amplify the reach of a post. It can make an exceptionally crazy post or a conspiratorial post appear to be more viral than it really would be otherwise. Again, maybe someone claiming to be a general who says that Ukraine has no hope, right? So all of these things, again, they say the narratives were targeted to specific American demographics. That's generally DOJ code for trying to do gender and racial fault lines in the United States, and regions, usually, again, this is code for swing states, in a calculated effort to subvert our election. Because Russia knows, just like everyone else knows, that at the end of the day, all but about 7 states don't matter in the election. They're too far gone, red or blue, to be worth spending any kind of money on. All right, so you, again, have to only just kind of win these couple of states, and then you got to win these swing states. So Russia's out there deploying lots of their cash to subvert the election and influence the swing states. As they say, Russia's influence, the scope of the Russian government's influence operations is now relying on AI to sow disinformation. So it used to be you could kind of tell if something was, an overseas Russian disinfo operation, but now it's really hard. It's going to look and feel authentic thanks to AI-powered stuff. Again, you could feed in some pretty grammatically terrible stuff into even a basic a chatbot or ChatGPT or a basic LLM, and it's going to spit out something very well constructed and very, very articulate. Of course, you can imagine that the DOJ, not exactly known for its incredible high-tech and sophisticated perspectives, still managed to take this down. It says that there's probably a lot underneath, right? For example, one of the very subtle Russian tactics they used here was to register WashingtonPost.pm to mimic WashingtonPost.com. Really subtle, right? And again, it published Russian government messaging falsely presented as content from the Washington Post. In other news, they created their own doppelganger content, like recent reliable news, to doppelganger and viewership. They also used fake influencers, right? Sometimes posing as U.S. citizens. But you could see that there's a lot here. Several propaganda directed against the United States. They actually have here what they call the Good Old USA Project, the Guerrilla Media Campaign, and the U.S. Social Media Influencer Network Project. This is wild. This is actually their project. This is the actual official intelligence translation from Russian. Wow. Let's see. So the project goal of U.S. media influencers, goal to create platforms on U.S. social media networks to strengthen pro-Russian sentiments among target audience in accordance with their KPIs. Good old Russia. The Kremlin even has their own KPIs. Interesting. They even say, this is crazy. I've never read this. This is actually, you know what? This probably needs to, this almost needs to be its own video. So we're going to save this and we're going to break this down in a separate video that's coming up. But for now, I want you guys to understand the scope and scale of what Russia is really up to. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Huge thank you to the Colonel tier members of CombatVetNews.com, including James Sterling, Steve Moran, Doug Beck, Alan Knudsen, Bastian Himmerling, Dale McCombs, James Zola, Henry Roussier, as well as all of our Lieutenant tier members. I couldn't do this without you guys. Be sure to join us over there, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.